Good morning, good afternoon. It is David Schlotthauer here with a detailed update on Hurricane Lee for Thursday, September 7th, 2023. As always, my thoughts in this video are mine alone, and making any decisions, please consult the National Hurricane Center and your local officials for the latest information for where you are. So taking a look at the latest true color shortwave IR satellite imagery provided by Dr. Levi Cowan at tropicaltidbits.com, and we can clearly show you all that Lee is rapidly intensifying right now with a very well clear eye popping out on the visible satellite imagery. In fact, this could already be a major hurricane based on the looks of this system, as this is now moving off towards the west-northwest at around 12 to 14 miles an hour. So it is still moving in that general direction. It's not moving west, which is good, but still it's going to be a close call with some impacts to the Virgin and Leeward Islands through the weekend. Here's a closer zoomed in view before we look at radar Omega on the storm in greater detail. Is that we do have a very symmetrical or increasing symmetrical system on Lee with what appears to be a very clear eye. We will show you that here on radar Omega. We're going to be zooming in and looking at this a little closer, but we also have organizing convective banding futures in all quadrants around the system with feathery white cirrus that do expand also in all quadrants, more likely stronger on the northeastern side, somewhat restricted right now on the western side of the system. And there does appear to be a little bit of shear that is getting in the way. When we look at these cirrus clouds in the lower levels, you can see how they're just being blown about in one direction, indicating that there is some shear here. But since Lee is able to rapidly intensify, it will likely be able to deflect a lot of that shear away, since this is going to be moving into a better environment. Now, looking at radar Omega, we can see what the system actually looks like up closer. And in the last few frames, you can see what is to be hints of some mesovortices going on in the system. And if we look at this closely, here's all that deep convection that's wrapping all the way around this system. And in the last few frames, you can see what appears to be some mesovortices, which usually signify that the hurricane is rapidly intensifying at an explosive rate in such a way that this could be a Category 4 this afternoon, since it's still right now technically from the NHC a Category 2 with winds of 105 miles an hour. So definitely a big system to really watch for very closely. This is a look at the latest NHC track cone forecast as of their 11 o'clock advisory. And again, it's expected to become a very powerful Category 4 hurricane this afternoon, and definitely a Category 4 all the way out here, perhaps reaching Category 5 intensity, which actually the NHC explicitly indicates that this is going to have max winds now of 160 miles an hour. And remember, in my live stream last night, I did state that my intensity was 160 even before the NHC actually upped their intensity to 160. So therefore, this seems very clear right now that we're going to be dealing with our first Category 5 hurricane since Ian of last year. Maximum winds with this system right now are at 105 miles an hour, moving off towards the west-northwest at 15 miles an hour, and it is still expected to pass safely away from these islands. But I also want to make it clear that this cone right here is even larger than the previous advisories, which means that there's even more greater uncertainty exactly where and how close this will get to the Bahamas, or how close, or if it's going to turn a little sooner than what the NHC has. So therefore, people in Puerto Rico and also in the southwestern Bahamas really need to be watching the latest progress of Lee, as this is expected to be a very intense Category 5 hurricane on the approach, or getting very close, or rather close, I should say, to the Bahamas, and even just not far to the north of Puerto Rico, probably within at least 150 miles, maybe a little closer than that or two. Looking at the latest, most likely arrival time of tropical storm force winds. This is a different product than what I've been using, showing us the most likely arrival time of those winds. And Puerto Rico and the Virgin Islands still under a 10 and 20% chance of seeing tropical storm force winds. And yes, there is still the chance of tropical storm force winds right now over the southeasternmost portion of the Bahamas at this time. Certainly out here, if you're a boater, definitely not good at all coming your way. Some very high waves, also some high surf expected along the coast here of these islands. We can be looking at wave heights approaching, say, perhaps 30 feet maybe or so, maybe even a little larger, depending on how close this gets to the island. So certainly stay away from the water this weekend. So looking at the key messages from Hurricane Lee this morning, Lee is forecast to become a major Category 4 hurricane today, with its core moving north of the Leeward Islands, the Virgin Islands, Puerto Rico this weekend and early next week. The potential for tropical storm conditions to occur in the islands is decreasing, but residents there should continue to monitor latest updates on Lee. Swells generated by Lee are expected to reach portions of the Lesser Antilles on Friday, and the British and U.S. Virgin Islands, Puerto Rico, Hispaniola, and the Bahamas and Bermuda this weekend. These swells are likely to cause life-threatening surf and rip currents. So now looking at the latest NHC advisory, this is very, very significant. We're gonna read the whole thing in this video. Yes, we're gonna take our own sweet time because this is serious information that we need to look at. Lee is rapidly intensifying early this morning. A well-defined low and mid-level eye was observed in microwave imagery, a signal that is often a precursor for rapid intensification. Since then, Lee has developed an eye in visible and infrared imagery, with subjective Doverick data T estimates quickly increasing to as high as about, say, 95 knots or so. Satellite classifications supported an intensity of about 80 knots at 12 UTC, but given the significant improvement in Lee's appearance since then, the advisory intensity is set to 90 knots in this current advisory. So right now, Lee is stronger than what we previously thought. They were only expecting this to be about 100 at this time. Now it's 105. 5 really doesn't make a huge difference, but it makes it that sooner of reaching Category 5 or so. The track guidance remains in good agreement on the forecast for Lee through the weekend, and confidence in the track forecast is high. Lee should continue west-northwestward, gradually slowing its forward speed, moving along the southern periphery of a subtropical ridge over the central Atlantic. Confidence continues to increase that Lee will pass north of the northern Leeward Islands through Those swells associated with Lee will affect the islands starting tomorrow. By the end of the forecast, the uncertainty is a little higher, with the hurricane models, the HAFS and HWRF, generally being further south than the global models. Very small changes were made to the NHC forecast, which is between the HCCA and the simple consensus aids. So that's important. Generally being further south with these hurricane models, that brings it closer to Puerto Rico and perhaps a little closer to the Bahamas and the southernmost Bahama island there. So definitely you all on Puerto Rico, as well as even on the Bahamas, definitely need to be monitoring this. I would not take your eyes off of Lee right now at the moment. As stated above, rapid intensification is occurring and will likely continue through today. The question doesn't appear to be if RI continues, but rather how strong will Lee get and how quickly will it get there. Many of the models are calling for remarkable rates of intensification, beyond rates normally seen with model forecasts. Both the HAFS model forecasts Lee to exceed 150 knots within the next couple of days, and even the HCCA brings the hurricane above the Category 5 threshold. The NHC forecast has been shifted significantly higher but is actually within the guidance envelope. It should be stressed that internal dynamics, Eyewall replacement cycles, will become a factor with the maximum strength of Lee as it becomes a major hurricane. This is almost certain to lead to fluctuations in intensity that are beyond our ability to forecast at these lead times. Hurricane Hunter aircraft are scheduled to investigate Lee beginning this evening and overnight, which should provide extremely useful information about Lee's intensity during the coming days. And they will be out there all night, and they will be out there all day tomorrow. So we are certainly to get more recon and more accurate data, which is nice to see. This is a look at the latest intensity forecast from the NHC, and they explicitly go for Category 5 hurricane on hours 36 to hour 48, which is extremely concerning for the NHC to do. You don't see this very often. You see this within, say, maybe 12 or 24 hours out, but rarely do you see this out to 2 days, them predicting a Category 5 hurricane, which really means that the ceiling on this is certainly Category 5 intensity. Now, fortunately, my intensity forecast has not been raised from the last one, but this could be generous. Maybe this afternoon I might have to raise it up a little bit if the hurricane models continue to be a little bit aggressive. But right now we're holding this at 160 miles an hour. Now, I did forget to show you all microwave paths really quickly on this, that in the last few frames here, definitely an eyewall really beginning to take shape here. I mean, pretty much closed at this moment, which explains why we are seeing what we're seeing here on the imagery with this very well-defined eye that we're beginning, that is popping out very nicely. And in fact, let's take a look at that one last time before we move on. And yeah, that is very, very intense. I've never seen anything like that in quite some time. So now looking at the latest, we're going to look at the global model, the European model, since it's right in line with our hurricane models pretty much. So what you're looking at here is a little different. We're looking at 3 plots. We're looking at the 850 millibar cyclonic vorticity. That's the color shading that you see on the map. That's this right here. And then, of course, you're seeing 200 millibar winds. That's this. So these flags that you see up here are indicating which way the wind is coming from. That's plot number 2. And plot number 3 is the mid-level steering flow where we have these height lines. That's the 18,000 foot height lines in the mid-levels at 500 millibars. So 3 plots put in one. All right, let's take this forward now with the European model. So, of course, as we all know, this hurricane is going to become exceptionally strong. That's what is well indicated here. This is 96 hours out. There's a ridge up here to the north, well modeled on the Euro at this point. So that's a given. That's why our track forecast is very high confidence throughout the next 3 to 4 days, because we know for sure that this ridge is going to exist. Now, the question remains is, does this ridge build a little faster and a little stronger? If it does, then we could see this shift a little further south, and we might see a little westerly jog with this system by this time, which what the Euro does indicate, because this ridge here seems to be sampled a little stronger on the Euro. This is day 5, and I'm telling you, I just went through about a day worth of time. Yeah, roughly about a day. Man, this is just barely moving. Hasn't moved very much at all. So this is just going to be at a crawl with motion that could be as low as 3 or 4 miles an hour for days 4 and 5. So it's not moving very much. And it's going to be interesting to see how far west this gets. When you get systems that slow down like this, it really becomes a huge uncertainty in the forecast, because what goes on to the north really will influence what goes on with Lee if it goes further west, if it's able to turn north sooner. But if this is able to go further west and then its launching point is like this could get very close to the eastern seaboard. So right now, at the moment, there is no chances of this hitting the eastern seaboard as of now. but I would not rule that out still in later updates, as this does get a little closer. According to the Euro, it is also a little bit faster with its output too. So a little closer and a little faster, which could be a little bit of a problem here going forward. But here's a look at the Euro precipitation forecast, and yeah, that's a big deal. That's some rain, and eventually some intense rainfall hitting Maine as early as, say, Saturday, September the 16th, okay? But again, this is a fairly uncertain forecast, and I really want you all to understand that, as I did state in last night's live stream. So looking at the hurricane models now, again, like I did last night, we're going to do the same thing. We're going to look at the latest intensity based on what we have. And I'm telling you right now, Lee is much stronger than this, perhaps way stronger. When we look at the latest air pressure from the NHC here, they are at 983 millibars. So this being at 984, 985, means that this needs to catch up a little bit more, and we're likely seeing winds that are much stronger than what the H-Wharf is showing. But either way you put it, Lee is expected to become a very strong hurricane, and I want to stress enough that the H-Wharf is our most conservative model. The H-Mon that I'm not going to show because it's doing some funky stuff, but the halves A and the halves B are very, very bullish. I have never seen anything like it in my entire life since tracking the tropics. And this truly, really has my attention now. So going out to 48 hours, 942 millibars, and it kind of stays here, but really look at this. 952 millibars in about 81 hours seems like a very unlikely scenario. This is forecasting a Category 3 hurricane, which is not expected by the NHC. So a very, very, very low-end forecast. Even the Euro is not showing that. In fact, the Euro is indicating that pressures could get down to as low as 900 millibars, which is alarming. You don't see that from a global model. So given that the H-Wharf is not even that low, really makes this an outlier scenario of a lower-end forecast. So now, given that the halves A initialize this a little stronger, 976, which probably seems to be a sure bet at this moment, we can see that by tonight, this could be a Category 5 hurricane. I am not joking, folks. I mean, this is 0Z, probably a Category 4 with 130 mile an hour winds. But by tonight, yeah, this is 145 knots, okay, with pressures down to 934. And then it gets stronger, 155 knots by tomorrow morning. So right there, less than 24 hours from now, we're going to go from a Category 2 to a Category 5 hurricane. That is remarkable, and that is astounding. But it gets even stronger than this. 925 millibars, 157 knots, 160 knots with pressures down to 917 millibars by Friday early afternoon. So this is really, really, really bad. And this is the halves A. Wait until I show you the halves B run, folks. That's even more aggressive than this. And this is going to remain very intense at a Category 5 or greater all the way through the forecast, perhaps maybe through the next 4 days before this actually begins to slowly weaken, possibly due to Eyewall replacement cycles. So if we can just extrapolate and look at the halves A, let alone, the maximum potential intensity with this is 165 knots, which is very alarming. The halves B on Lee is also very concerning for this afternoon. Not as strong with 977 millibar pressures, but winds also not very strong. But don't let that fool you. By tomorrow morning, this could have winds up to 141 and then reaching Category 5 intensity based on all the intensity guidance for Friday. And this remains a very powerful hurricane with 152 knot winds, maybe 160 knots as what the halves A was showing. And then that weakens and an Eyewall replacement cycle tries to occur. But pressures bouncing around between about 910 to 915 millibars, which really illustrates a powerful Category 5 hurricane. So now, where is this headed, you might ask, in the first 5 days? Since we showed you the global models, we're going to look at the spaghetti plot. This is right now, if we take a look here in the next couple of days, this is going to be moving off towards the west-northwest. But see this right in here or so, this begins to make a westerly jog, okay, right towards the southern or southwest or southeastern Bahama Islands. So therefore, we're going to keep an eye on the model trends to see what all happens with this, because this could be awfully close. This could get kind of uncomfortably close, as you can see there, with winds that are near or that are not far from tropical storm force on those islands. So there could be some very high surf there, as well as some really intense winds and maybe some outflow boundary type rains too from this hurricane. So that's a look at that. That's the moisture plot. Let's take a look now at our spaghetti plot. Who likes spaghetti, folks? Yummy, yummy, yummy. All right, so this is the 12Z initialized model run, and we can see there for not just one, but look at a lot of the hurricane models here going towards the west with this system beyond day 4, which is very concerning. Out to day 5, yet in fact the HAVS A is furthest west. That is not really far from the Bahamas, for one of the Bahama Islands, and it is also not very far from the Dominican Republic either. So this is bear watching in days to come, as we're going to keep an eye on the trends. The GFS and the CMC, they're only ones, the only globals want this to turn towards the north beyond day 5, which is also a distinct possibility. But I've told you that there's a lot of traffic to the north. We have a trough, then we have a ridge, then it's just very complicated for the models to resolve. And we may not even know about this for a couple more days yet on exactly how this is all going to evolve. This is a look at the 0Z spaghetti plot on the ensemble forecast, and this is the super blend, by the way. This is comparing the ensemble prediction system, the UK Met Office, as well as the GEFS and the CMC. So 4 ensemble models put into one, making a super blend. And yes, look at this. There are distinct possibilities now that this could get close. There's even increasing chances over the Bahamas now, up to 20 or 25% chance that the Bahamas could now get a very close call with Lee, as these spaghetti plots are actually further west now. We will see if the trend continues, but this is bear watching in days to come, including for Bermuda, as well as in future updates up here across the Northeast. In fact, one model member wants this right on top of New Jersey, which is also a distinct possibility. But again, very complicated forecast with the track forecast that is very, very large out to day 7 and day 8. Until we can get a better understanding, until we can get recon, I am hoping the G4 aircraft, the upper level drops on mission, will be conducted on this to help better feed the models newer data that could better correct towards an actual concrete scenario. So here's a look at how strong Lee can get, and as we stated, a Category 5 is now expected on this forecast. The NHC, it's not on here right now, but in their next outlook, it's going to be all the way up here to a Category 5. Actually, wait. Yeah, right up here is going to be where their forecast calls for this to become. Therefore, my intensity forecast is right with their forecast right now. There's no notable changes to it. It is the same as yesterday, with this right now at a Category 2, and my peak intensity, since this is behind, we're right about in here. So this is where we're at, and my intensity forecast does call this to become now a Category 5 with 160 mile-an-hour winds, right on par with their forecast. That's not all we have in this video. We also have, again, the extended spaghetti plot showing you a high-end Category 4, but look at all these models here. There is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 models, perhaps almost 6 models, indicating a Category 5 hurricane, which is very, very concerning, which states the fact that we are going to see Lee becoming a Category 5 hurricane within the next 18 to 36 hours. Well, just to overview with what we talked about, again, Lee is already nearing a major hurricane. It's probably already at that given the satellite presentation. A very, very clear eye. In fact, perfectly circular at this moment. So therefore, this is a special quick update that Lee is now a major hurricane with 115 mile an hour winds as we speak. I know I'm calling it too early, but boy, that is a very, very ominous presentation right now on Visible, indicating that Lee is now a very formidable hurricane, and it is continuing to rapidly intensify as it continues to move off towards the west-northwest at around 14 to 15 miles an hour. I hope this video helped you out a lot, folks. If it did, please consider subscribing, sharing this video with your family and friends. Please get the word out, because now the Bahamas could be at play here, and eventually, who knows, is the Eastern Seaboard at play? Stay tuned for more updates. I will have an afternoon update on this scheduled for about 4:30 Pacific Daylight Time on Hurricane Lee. Since this is rapidly intensifying, it is now necessary to do a second video. Thanks for watching. Be back with more this afternoon.